the first of a series of events. This being craft, the next being collaborate, and the one after that being create. The next one in 3 months' time. And the next one's in 3 months' time after that. I'm aiming to get the guild forward for the next one. Because I think if we can all collectively come together, and we can go big at the end. What I've asked each of the speakers to do is think about that next stage of collaboration. Think about people that you know in the room that you might want to collaborate with. I'm not sure quite where our first conversation is going to go, but Louise and I have been looking into craft in different ways, so we thought that we might just sit down and have a chat about it as an introduction to what we're doing today, which is talking about craft and process. And hopefully you will have gathered that's quite a variety and a diversity of process and ideas in the room. So hopefully by the end of the day we'll see the similarities but also see where the differences are. I would like to say thank you for the support of the University of Winchester who have supported the promotion of Ignite over the last couple of events, and hopefully there'll be future kind of collaborations in that front. And yeah, we will hopefully go bigger and better next time. Louise has got lots of questions for me about craft. We've got a couple of images as well, which I'll put up. Would you like to introduce yourself in this context?
Okay. So my name is Louise Tunnard, and I would call myself an image maker. So in the Venn diagram of art and craft, I would like to think that I sit in the intersection. And what I do is I basically make images using photographic materials. That's photographic paper, chemicals, light, and it's a process called chemigrams. It was developed by an artist, a Belgian artist called Pierre Cordier, in about the mid-1950s. And it's a way of making images without a camera. If you were to cut me open, it would say photographer. That would run all the way through me. But I became fascinated in trying to make photographic images but without a camera, so that led on to pinhole image making and then on to chemigrams. And what you see here is, it's a canopy, it's called Always All of Us, and the idea was that we sit amongst our brethren. We sit within our tribe, and the interrelationships that we have make these wonderful shapes and connections. And so this was basically using a horse chestnut tree to make my own canopy to sit under. And so my work features a lot of leaves. I like the idea that every leaf is different. But I feel that in making these works, so this was another canopy. This was a hydrangea. This was in an exhibition at the Manor Gallery. And this was about vessels and the idea that the life goes from the root of the plant up through all of these vessels and forms a protective canopy at the top, which has its own ecosystem. And then this one, this is some new experiments. I was doing a project which was basically a garden that came out of nowhere. We live in town, we have no garden, and my husband created all of these wonderful little, it's like herbs and courgettes, vegetables. They sprung out of nowhere, and I wanted to record them. This is a courgette leaf. Then these are some ferns. I have a real passion for ferns. I love the fact that they are, it's fractals where they replicate. And I just think this is the maths and the beauty of that is something that really appealed to me. This process of image making, it has very firm boundaries because you're using paper, you're using light, and you can adjust various things. And I love the fact that I'm in control of part of the process, but a lot of the process is serendipity, and I'm learning all the time, adding to my skill set and going off in directions that when I started out I could never have predicted that's where I would end up. And then the last one, this was a rhubarb leaf, and I cut it in half, and to me it just felt like angel wings. And I just love the kind of abstract nature, even though it might be a leaf, there's a feeling of a heart, lungs, an organ about it. And so that's my trajectory at the moment. I still take photographs all the time. My whole world is framed. It's all about tones, and I think the other thing about this process is I have a very limited palette, so I have to express things within a very limited palette, which also I think helps make you be creative. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you very much for sharing. What's quite illuminating is how little we've talked about that in the time that we've worked together. Louise and I work together, particularly on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
But it's quite a strong reflection immediately to obviously honing your craft, and you're making time to do that.
Because I think the thing about the craft is the fact that you are always learning and adding to those skills, and I feel that it's something that will never stop. Because I know you as an architect, but I also know you as an artist, so in a way I feel that in the Venn diagram you sit.
Somewhere.
What does craft mean to you?
I think to me it is a little bit about process. I'm not going to kick in too much about what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to try and wrap that up at the end. But I think I've been relying a little bit on a reference, which is, I don't know whether you've come across The Craftsman by Sennett, which is Sennett. It's a reasonable read. Some in the room wouldn't necessarily agree with me. But what's interesting is just the analysis and the kind of consideration of craft both then and now. And by then, we look at craft back almost in medieval times, and it's strange that we've got bits of the cathedral that have been honed and shaped out there, and those guilds and the craftsman-like work of centuries is what we refer back to when we talk about craft. I sort of associate craft with that skill set, so that stonemason, the master builder.
I think it's the idea of learning things over time and in real time.
Yeah.
You're an apprentice and you study for years and you work with people who are very skilled, and there is this kind of osmosis, this transmission from one person to another, which is very beautiful, and then you add to that language and then you pass it on. There's this real feeling of passing the baton on down through what you do, which I think is one of the things that feels very beautiful about craft. And there's generosity to it.
Yeah.
And I think but the other thing, all the people who I know who I would think they would consider themselves to be craftsmen, it's the materiality. It's the love of their materials. Just as I'm passionate about photographic chemicals, I'm sure you're passionate about bread, you're passionate about yarn, Mick is passionate about clay, and you're probably passionate about materials as well. There's that thread that runs through it. But then I think it's artists feel the same, I would think. But there's division between the emotion in art, and then practicality as it sits beneath craft.
Because my sort of business hat says it's in holding it, a little bit, and I feel that there's a disconnect between that kind of apprentice and that learning and that teaching and that evolution of things, and it's almost like it's repetition through the schools of those crafts that created that very special thing, and that used to take years. So it used to take years to become an apprentice, or years to qualify. Within the guild itself. It's
what makes my heart sing when you see something advertised and it says learn whatever it might be in 3 months. And the idea that you would be an expert, whereas I feel, for me, craft and what I'm doing, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime of learning. It will never stop. And when they know what they've done, I'm sure there's still something I'll be wanting to try.
Yeah.
It just won't have stopped.
It's what was quite interesting in just reading it was just the observation of how it's happened over time, and how there's been a complete kind of change in having the development of a craft around a particular time or era, and then all of a sudden the printing press came in, and so everyone's craft was lost, and then it was almost like society had to repurpose and figure it out. And I feel a little bit at the moment that we're in that flux. AI has presented something, but we're not quite ready for it.
But there are these technological shifts, which means we have to adapt around that. And I was thinking about an example of a friend of mine who specialises in 3D printing, which is like super cutting edge. And he was commissioned recently to replicate the Pont Neuf. It was for a shop window display. And so all the pieces of this puzzle, if you like, are made through 3D printing. But then the craft came into coating these things, assembling it was in Selfridge's window, and it started off as a point level at one end, and then gradually became cubes at the other end. And it was for a display of very high-end fashion. And to me, I thought that's wonderful, because he's taken that creative impulse, all of that skill, translating something visual into something, an idea into something physical, but using very modern technology. And I think this is where craft is so exciting. It's at the margins where these things collide and then are sent off in different directions by AI. And that hopefully will continue. But I think as human beings, we are ingenious. We'll find ways to adapt, and that's the great thing. And be very creative around it. I think generally the kind of general acceptance with craft is that there is a product, whereas art is perhaps more of an artifact. But then I think there are things that would sit in two camps, and I would really hate to be nailing down definitions, because I think that's when you kill things. We're trying to pin it down and fix it. And life is about, we're always in a state of flux. We're moving away from something and towards something else. And hopefully that will never change.
It's strange because you say it's that categorisation, giving someone a title.
Yes, because it helps us understand. If you give someone a title like image making, I know who you are, which is great. But I and everyone else in this room is so much more than any label that you want to give them. And also we have diverse interests that kind of feed in and shift and move. I think also there's a question of what value is that you place on whatever you've made at the end of it. And sometimes that defines whether it's art or craft. There's this kind of market forces that come in.
What's the price?
I don't know. No, I have no idea, but I do feel there is that.
It's craft in itself. I think that's pretty much a good introduction. Has anyone got any questions or thoughts just arising out of that?
Yeah, it's supply and demand, isn't it? That's what governs the price. You're creating an art. Does that picture have a title?
Yes. Do you know, I can't remember what I called it. It was something arty-farty, and I know that it's rhubarb leaves. I can't remember. I did it a couple of years ago. I think it was to do with Icarus.
It means there's a story behind the picture which sort of adds value to the picture.
I think there is that, certainly, but I think also any one of you, I'm sure, when you've seen a piece of art and you think, I just love that. I don't care who it's made by, or it's the fact that you've connected to that almost on a molecular level and you want to own it.
And you might want to rename
it. Yeah. You want to.
Their response, I study expressive art therapy. Art form is a vessel for us to imagine something or create something. So when the artist finding the material or the art, the nature itself brings meaning, but people can create their own meaning, their story, whatever. So it's quite powerful. You pick up those very good moment or outlook. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Louise.